An email at 9:47 a.m. changed everything. It sat there in my inbox, cold and sharp, with the subject line, "Dinner with the Mitchells, Friday, 7 p.m." A formal invite from HR, slapped with a cheap smiley face emoji like that made it personal. After 22 years of sweat and blood building CoreLogic Dynamics from a scrappy tech startup in a rented Atlanta warehouse into a $120 million analytics giant with global clients, I, Nathan Brooks, wasn't summoned to a boardroom or an investor call. No. I was called to dinner with Greg Mitchell, the CEO, and his family. 22 years of dedication. I built systems, closed deals, kept the office lights on. Greg used to call me the quiet engine, but lately, I felt a cold breeze. Meetings canceled, reports ignored, and loud interns tossing around buzzwords like confetti. I knew what was coming. This dinner wasn't to honor me. It was a trap, a staged play, to push me out of the company I'd created. But they didn't know one thing. I'm not the kind of guy who gets forgotten. I've held on to a secret since 2003, a piece of paper Greg thought I'd tossed aside. And when they think they're writing my ending, I'm ready to flip the board. I didn't want to go, but I went anyway, stepping into the swanky rooftop restaurant on Peachtree Street, Atlanta, where the city lights glittered through massive glass windows. The smell of overpriced scallops and expensive wine hung in the air, but it didn't ease the tension knotting inside me. I wore a navy dress shirt, silver cufflinks my son gave me for Father's Day. I looked sharp, executive, the way I'd always shown up for 22 years at CoreLogic Dynamics. I was the first hire at CoreLogic. Back then, we had 3 clients and a printer that jammed if you stared at it too long. I built the client systems from scratch, negotiated vendor contracts, handled finances until we could afford a CFO. I closed deals that kept the company alive through the darkest days. Greg Mitchell, the founder, used to say I kept everything running when it all threatened to collapse. But the last few months, things shifted. Greg got distant. My reports were skimmed, not read. Our Monday meetings turned into bi-weekly calls, sometimes canceled without a reason. Then the interns showed up, young, loud, spitting buzzwords, like blockchain and AI, as if they were magic fixes. I felt the change, like a cold gust before a window swings open. So when the dinner invite hit my inbox, I had a hunch. I just didn't know how bad it would get. The restaurant glowed with dramatic lighting. Greg was already there, standing by a long white linen table, next to his wife, Linda, and their daughter, Chloe. Chloe looked like she'd stepped off a LinkedIn profile. Blonde hair, crisp linen suit, not a wrinkle in sight. She radiated the smug confidence of a Gen Z CEO. "Nathan," Greg flashed a big smile, arms open. "So glad you made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, forcing a smile and sliding into the seat across from him. My stomach coiled like rope. Dinner kicked off like any corporate gathering. Too much wine, too many empty compliments. Chloe asked about CoreLogic's early days, her tone light but dripping with condescension. "It's so funny picturing you guys working out of some tiny warehouse or whatever," she said, with a giggle. I smiled. Wasn't funny at the time. Greg cleared his throat. "Actually, Nathan saved the company twice in the first 5 years. He landed the defense contract that got us our first $1 million. Chloe smirked. "Well, every company needs its building blocks." I should have walked out right then. But I stayed, because I wanted to see how far they'd go. Halfway through the main course, halibut over saffron rice, Greg folded his hands on the table, like he was offering peace. "Nathan," he said slowly, "we've been doing some long-term planning. You've been critical to getting CoreLogic where it is today." I kept my face neutral. "Here it comes. But as we position the company for the next phase, we think it's time for a new generation. Fresh energy, new vision." I nodded slightly. "Chloe just finished her executive leadership program at Stanford," he added, voice brimming with pride, as if I hadn't mentored a handful of Ivy League grads already. "Impressive," I said calmly. "What's the transition plan?" Greg looked relieved. 6 weeks. Chloe will shadow you to start. We'll make the formal announcement after the quarterly call." He paused. "Of course, there's a generous severance package. We want you to feel appreciated." That's when Chloe leaned forward, fork in hand, eyes glinting. "Time to step aside, old man," she said with a smug grin. "Let us take it from here." The table went silent. Linda's fork froze midair. I stared at Chloe for a long moment. Then I smiled. Completely understand. What they didn't know, what they didn't even bother to check, was that CoreLogic wasn't just a company I helped build. It was a company I owned a piece of, in a way they'd forgotten. Back in 2003, when we were on the brink of bankruptcy, Greg gave me 5% equity, because he couldn't afford a raise. I never sold it. I'd been quietly watching, holding voting rights, waiting for the day it mattered. They thought I was a washed-up pawn, but they were dead wrong. The next day, I met with Tom Rivera, a 28-year-old junior employee I'd been mentoring. He was full of energy, but easily swayed by shiny promises. When I mentioned the dinner, his eyes lit up at Chloe's name. She was talking about blockchain and automation, he said. Sounds cutting edge. I gave a small smile. Cutting edge doesn't mean right, Tom. He nodded, but I saw the hesitation. He was impressed by Chloe, and that worried me. Tom was someone I trusted, but his loyalty hadn't been tested yet. Monday I walked back into CoreLogic's Midtown Atlanta office, grabbing a black coffee from the machine that still hissed like a steam train. I logged into my email, access still intact, no official word yet, just silence, like the calm before a storm. Mike Delgado, a data engineer, stopped by my office with a cautious look. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just a dinner with the Mitchells." Mike winced. Heard some whisper. People are confused. I met his eyes. Let him wonder. I wasn't ready to show my hand, but inside, I was set. CoreLogic was my legacy, and no one, not even Chloe Mitchell, was going to take it from me. I opened the shareholder portal, checked my 5% stake. It was still there, untouched, worth more than ever, with new investor cash pouring in. I downloaded everything: stock agreements, voting history, executive pay packages. Then I requested a private meeting with Greg's assistant. The game was on, and I was playing to win. I never forgot the day Greg handed me that piece of paper. It was 2003. CoreLogic Dynamics was teetering on bankruptcy, and I just pulled an all-nighter fixing a billing glitch that nearly cost us our biggest client. Greg walked into my cramped Atlanta office, eyes bloodshot, holding a single-page agreement. "Nathan," he said, voice hoarse with worry, "I can't pay you what you're worth right now, but if we make it through, I want you to have a piece of this company." Back then, I barely glanced at it, exhausted and naive, thinking it was just a thank you note on paper. But that paper, 5% equity, was now the ace I held tight in my hand. I sat in my home office in suburban Atlanta, morning light slipping through the window, glinting off my old oak desk. The humid spring air clung to my skin, and the chirping birds outside did nothing to calm the quiet anger smoldering inside me. After that dinner on Peachtree Street, Chloe's words, "Time to step aside, old man," still echoed in my head. She thought I was a relic, a stepping stone for her to walk over, but she didn't know. I didn't just build CoreLogic. I owned a piece of it, and I was going to make them remember. Monday I walked into CoreLogic's Midtown office, where sunlight streamed through massive glass windows, lighting up the modern open-plan space with white desks and wall-mounted screens. I grabbed a black coffee from the machine that still hissed like a steam engine, took a deep breath, and logged into the system. My access was still intact, no official word yet, but I felt the heavy silence, like the air before a thunderstorm. I opened the shareholder portal, checked my 5% stake. It was still there, now worth millions, thanks to new investor cash. I downloaded everything: stock agreements, voting history, executive pay packages. Each document was a bullet, and I was loading the clip. Chloe showed up mid-morning, striding into my office with a fake smile, holding a latte from the coffee shop downstairs. "Morning, Nathan," she said, her voice sweet but sharp. "Just want to learn more about your processes. You know, to get ready." She sat down, legs crossed, eyes flicking to my computer screen. I smiled. "Ask away." She started with harmless questions: how I approved budgets, managed vendors, but I saw her look. She wasn't here to learn. She was here to take over. "You still approve everything manually?" she asked, a hint of surprise in her tone. "Always," I said. "Catches error. Automation can't." She smirked. "Kinda old school, huh? We could use AI to predict costs." I looked her dead in the eye. "AI's only as good as the data. Half our clients run systems from a decade ago. Garbage in, garbage out." She blinked, clearly not getting it, but flashed another smile. "Thanks for sharing," she said, standing up. "I'll be back." I nodded, but I knew. She wasn't coming back to learn. She was coming back to replace me. At noon, Mike Delgado, my data engineer, stopped by my office, holding a stack of reports. "Nathan," he said, voice low, "something's off." Chloe asked for access to client data. "She's talking about optimizing the systems." I raised an eyebrow. "Optimizing how?" Mike shrugged. "She didn't say. Just kept saying modernize." I nodded. "Keep an eye on the systems, Mike. No changes go through without my sign-off." Mike nodded, but I saw the worry in his eyes. Chloe was moving, and she was moving fast. That afternoon, I pulled an old file box from the safe in my home office. Inside were relics from CoreLogic's early days, system sketches, notes from client pitches, even a few UI mock-ups scribbled on napkins. Then I found what I was looking for, an NDA Greg, signed in 2005, acknowledging that some of the company's proprietary tools came from my prior consulting work. A small detail most people would forget. But I don't forget. I snapped photos of the document and sent them to Claire, IP attorney I'd known since college. Claire, I texted, we need to talk. That evening, I met Claire at a small bistro near Padmont Park, where warm yellow lights clashed with Atlanta's cool evening breeze. Claire, with her short brown hair and sharp eyes, flipped through the documents I'd brought. Nathan, she said, grinning, you own this. At least part of it. With your equity and this NDA, you've got leverage they didn't see coming. I exhaled, feeling the weight of 22 years lift slightly. They think I'm a stepping stone, I said. Claire sipped her coffee. Then let's show them a stone can crack a foundation. The next day, I requested a private meeting with Greg through his assistant. She was surprised but agreed. When I walked into Greg's office on Wednesday, he looked up with a tired smile. Nathan, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. How's it going? Curious, I said, sitting down. You didn't mention the equity I still hold. Greg's smile froze just a fraction. I assumed you'd cashed out by now. Nope, I said, placing the printed shareholder agreement on his desk. And unless I'm missing something, I still have voting rights. Greg folded his hands, his voice calm but strained. Nathan, we don't need to make this complicated.
Yes.
We're offering a generous severance package. I'm not leaving yet, I said evenly. I'll support the transition, do it with class. But if Chloe's planning to restructure the company, bring in her own people, or sell off assets, I want my say. He frowned. You're holding on to something out of sentiment. No, I said. I'm holding on to what I built. I stood up and walked out before he could respond. That afternoon, Tom Rivera stepped into my office, looking uneasy. Nathan, he said, Chloe just pulled me into a new project. She's talking about me leading an AI development team. Says I've got potential. I studied him, trying to read his thoughts. Sounds tempting, I said. But be careful, Tom. Big promises usually come with a bigger price. Tom nodded, but his eyes wavered. Chloe was reeling him in, and I wasn't sure which side he'd land on. By the end of the day, I got an email from Claire. Started drafting the IP protection filings. She wrote, you'll have legal leverage if they play dirty. I smiled, staring out my office window, as the sunset stained the Atlanta sky red. Chloe thought she was in the driver's seat, but she had no idea. The seeds of betrayal had been planted, and I was watering them with patience. I got an email from Mike on Tuesday morning, a short subject line. Check this out. Attached was an invite to a strategy meeting from Chloe, sent to the entire leadership team, except me. The words Vision 2.0, CoreLogic's future starts now, glared like a cheap LinkedIn slogan. I smiled, but not out of amusement. Chloe was playing big, and she'd just made her first mistake. I sat in my office in Midtown Atlanta, spring sunlight pouring through the massive glass windows, lighting up the sleek conference space with its glass walls and modern whiteboards. Atlanta's humid air clung to my navy dress shirt, and the hum of Peachtree Center drifted up through the window. After my confrontation with Greg last week, I knew Chloe would make a move, but I didn't expect her to be this fast or this reckless. I clicked open Mike's attachment, a 3-page agenda stuffed with buzzwords: brand repositioning, outsourcing services, operational optimization. I laughed out loud. Outsourcing the back end. Half of CoreLogic's value was in back-end support. Clients didn't come to us for flashy dashboards. They came because we kept their systems running when everyone else bailed. I took a sip of black coffee from a paper cup, eyes glued to the screen. Chloe didn't know the company. She knew of the company, from stories Greg told over Sunday brunch, but the staff was different. They were starting to whisper, and I heard those murmurs in the hallway. She wants to change everything, an engineer muttered to a colleague near the water cooler. But who's gonna fix the systems when clients start yelling? I smiled. The seeds of doubt were sprouting. At noon, Sarah Bennett, the operations lead, stepped into my office, holding a stack of documents. Nathan, she said, voice low, people are nervous. Chloe just asked for cost reports on the entire back-end system. She's talking about cuts. I raised an eyebrow. Cuts how? Sarah shrugged. She didn't specify, but the IT team's freaking out. They're hearing rumors about outsourcing. I nodded. Document everything, Sarah. Every email, every request. If she wants to play, We need proof. Sarah nodded, her eyes steady. Got it. But Nathan, what's your plan? I gave a small smile. Just keeping things steady. For now. That afternoon, Mike swung by, looking more stressed than usual. Nathan, Chloe just had a quick huddle with the data team. She wants me to hand over access to the client data repository. I tilted my head. Did she say why? Mike shook his head. Just said it's for predictive analytics. But she doesn't know how the data works. I tried explaining, but she cut me off. I clapped a hand on Mike's shoulder. Hold the keys, Mike. If she pushes, tell her to come through me. Mike nodded, but I could see he was rattled. Chloe wasn't just stepping in. She was trying to take over. I decided to act. I opened Chloe's agenda again, scanning every line. Then I noticed something. The new client retention model sounded familiar. I dug through my hard drive, pulling up a strategy document I'd written 6 years ago, when CoreLogic faced a client crisis. The wording was nearly identical. Chloe had raided the archives and copied my work, changing nothing but the font. I smiled. She'd just handed me a weapon. I found Chloe in the conference room, standing at the whiteboard, sketching diagrams with a blue mark. Nathan, she said, her smile forced. What's up? I stepped forward, holding a printout of my old document. Just checking in, I said, voice calm. Your new client retention model. Impressive, but it feels familiar. I set the document on the table, right in front of her. You should cite your sources. Plagiarism doesn't look great on quarterly reports. Chloe's smile faltered, just for a second, but I saw her squirm. I'm just modernizing, she said. Your work was a solid foundation. I smiled. No problem. Just make sure you give credit where it's due. I walked out, leaving Chloe with her whiteboard and a seed of unease. But I wasn't done. I emailed Cindy and Mike, asking them to track every change Chloe proposed. Log the details, I wrote. We need a clear paper trail. I knew Chloe wouldn't stop, but every misstep she took was a brick I'd use to build my wall. Late that day, Tom Rivera showed up, looking more conflicted than before. Nathan, he said, standing in my office doorway. I was at Chloe's meeting today. She pitched Vision 2.0. Everyone clapped, but I'm not sure. I studied him, trying to read his emotions. Not sure about what. Tom shrugged. She talked about outsourcing, rebranding. But when I asked about legacy clients, she said they'd adapt. I don't think so. I nodded. Clients don't adapt, Tom. They walk. Did she mention the back-end systems? Tom shook his head. No, but she asked about you. Wanted to know how you manage data. I gave a small smile. Chloe was probing, but she wasn't slick enough. Listen, Tom, I said. She can promise the world, projects, promotions, but look at the reality. This company stands because we know what clients need, not because of flashy PowerPoint slides. Tom nodded, but his eyes wavered. He was caught in Chloe's shine, and I wasn't sure he'd hold firm. Thanks for telling me, I said. Keep your eyes open, and let me know if anything feels off. Tom left, leaving me wondering about loyalty, how easily it sways when glittering promises come calling. That night, I sat at a small coffee shop near Peachtree Center. Neon lights, reflecting off the wooden table. I opened my laptop, checking an email from Claire Thompson. IP filings are ready, she wrote. If Chloe tries using your tools without credit, we can lock her out. I took a sip of coffee, feeling like a boxer counting beats before the next round. Chloe thought she was leading, but the whispers in the hallway were turning against her. And me? I just had to stand still and let her trip over herself. I knew the storm had begun when Mike walked into my office Thursday morning, his face pale like he'd seen a ghost. Nathan, he said, voice shaky, Chloe's vendor migration just crashed. The back-end system's glitching, and 2 major clients are blowing up our phones. I took a sip of black coffee, giving a small smile. Let me guess. She didn't check compatibility? Mike nodded. She said it'd save millions of dollars. Now we're at risk of losing contracts. I leaned back, feeling like a chess player watching an opponent blunder. Chloe had just put herself in check. I sat in my Midtown Atlanta office, spring sunlight streaming through the glass windows, illuminating the open-plan space with its white desks and big screens. The humid air stuck to my dress shirt, and the hum of Peachtree Street buzzed below like the city's heartbeat. After exposing Chloe's plagiarism last week, I knew she'd push harder, but I didn't expect her to stumble this fast. The vendor migration was her dumbest idea yet. CoreLogic's back-end system was the backbone, built by me to weather any crisis. Chloe thought she could swap it for a cheap vendor without testing. She was wrong, and now the whole company was paying for it. I opened my laptop, checking an email from Sarah Bennett. Client X just sent a formal complaint. she wrote. They say if the errors continue, they're pulling their contract. I smiled. The whispers in the hallway had turned into roars. I replied to Sarah. Document everything. Send me a copy of the letter. Then I called Claire Thompson, my IP attorney. Claire, I said, we need to send a cease and desist. Chloe's using my modules in the new system without credit. Claire laughed over the phone. It's ready. I'll send the cease and desist letter by morning. I nodded, feeling like I was drawing a bowstring. The arrow aimed straight at Chloe. At noon, I left the office, driving to a small diner near Piedmont Park, where the smell of grilled sandwiches and freshly brewed coffee mixed with Atlanta's humid air. I had a meeting with Mark Sullivan, CEO of Technova, a company that nearly acquired CoreLogic last year. Mark sat at a corner table, wearing a crisp white shirt, his eyes sharp like an investor sniffing opportunity. Nathan, he said, shaking my hand. Been a while. I smiled. Thanks for making time, Mark. We ordered coffee, and I cut to the chase. CoreLogic's going through a leadership shift, I said, but there's trouble. Systems are unstable, and the new team lacks experience. Mark raised an eyebrow. Heard as much. Some of your talents reached out to us. I smiled. If you're interested, I can tell you which systems to protect, and who actually knows them. Mark nodded slowly, his eyes glinting. Keep me posted, Nathan. I left the diner, feeling like I'd planted a landmine under Chloe's plans. I wasn't sabotaging CoreLogic, but I was drawing a line in the sand. If they wanted to play dirty, I had allies. That afternoon, I found Chloe in my old office, feet up on the desk, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I knocked, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. What's up? She asked, like I was some low-level staffer. Need a few minutes, I said, stepping in, voice steady. You're losing the company. Chloe sat up straight, eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? I leaned forward. You think people will follow you because you talk about innovation and branding. But this company was built on trust, relationships, and systems that actually work. You're tearing it down to prove a point. She scoffed. Are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm giving you a chance. Lead if you want, but don't burn the foundation just to show you've got a match. Chloe didn't answer, just stared at me, her confidence cracking a little. Bull. I walked out, leaving her with the silence. That night, Tom Rivera found me at a coffee shop near Peachtree Center. Neon lights bouncing off the wooden table. He looked nervous, twisting his coffee cup in his hands. Nathan, he said, voice low, Chloe pressured me to bypass your protocols. She wanted me to send back-end data straight to the new vendor. I raised an eyebrow. Did you do it? Tom shook his head. No, I said I needed your approval. She got mad, told me I didn't need you anymore. I gave a small smile. Thanks for telling me, Tom. You did the right thing. Tom looked at me, eyes wavering. Oh, I don't know, Nathan. She promised a promotion if I followed her. But after the vendor mess today, I'm not sure she knows what she's doing. I clapped his shoulder. Keep watching, Tom. The truth'll show itself. Tom nodded, and this time, I saw a spark of loyalty flicker back in his eyes. The next morning, Claire's cease and desist letter went out to Chloe and the board, demanding they stop using my proprietary modules. Sarah reported 2 more clients had sent complaint letters, threatening to walk if service didn't improve. I sat in my office, watching Atlanta's sky turn gray, storm clouds rolling in. Chloe still had the microphone, but the stage was tilting my way. I sent an email to Mark Sullivan. If your board's serious, now's the time to move. The storm was coming, and I'd already built the levees. The boardroom was thick with tension, like the air before an explosion. I stood at the door, taking a deep breath, feeling Atlanta's humid spring air slip through the collar of my navy dress shirt. Diane Foster, the board chairwoman, had called an emergency meeting, and I knew this was the moment of truth. Chloe had stumbled, clients were furious, and I, Nathan Brooks, was holding the final card. I stepped into the Midtown boardroom, where floor-to-ceiling glass windows revealed Atlanta's skyline shimmering under the spring sun. A long walnut table dominated the center, surrounded by directors, the leadership team, and one special guest, Mark Sullivan, CEO of Technova. Greg Mitchell sat at the far end, looking a decade older than he had last week, his eyes hollow. Chloe sat beside him, frantically flipping through a leather notebook that held nothing of value. I took a seat across from Mark, feeling every gaze in the room. The air was heavy, like everyone was holding their breath. Diane stood, her voice calm but sharp. Before we begin, she said, nodding toward me, we need to address the elephant in the room. Nathan has raised concerns, contractual, technical and operational, that weren't disclosed during our assessment of CoreLogic's transition phase. A few heads turned. Greg's face was stone. Chloe glanced at me, her eyes betraying fear for the first time. Diane continued, per our original shareholder agreement, any attempt to restructure executive functions requires unanimous consent if it impacts stakeholders with over a 3% share. She looked at me. Nathan, would you like to speak? I stood, not rushed, not emotional, just grounded. I'm not here to cause chaos, I began, voice steady. I've never wanted that. I'm here because for over 2 decades, I gave everything to this company, and somewhere along the way, people started treating that as a weakness, as something disposable. Chloe's jaw clenched, but I didn't look at her. I don't want a crown. I don't need a title, but I do want my work respected. I want my contributions acknowledged, and I want whoever leads this company to understand that innovation means nothing without a foundation to stand on. The room fell silent. Then Mark Sullivan cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping the room. We've been watching closely, he said, gesturing around, and we've seen the fallout. 3 major clients have voiced concerns. 2 have paused contract renewals. And based on internal reports, the systems that make CoreLogic valuable aren't as autonomous as previously claimed. His eyes shifted to Chloe. She froze. He looked back at the board. Our offer still stands, but it's contingent on leadership stability. Frankly, we won't move forward if the current transition plan remains in place. His words landed like a guillotine. Chloe had to go. Greg opened his mouth, but Diane raised a hand. 10-minute recess. People stood, whispering as they filtered into the hallway. I stayed seated. So did Chloe. She looked at me, her arrogance gone. I didn't mean to destroy anything, she said, her voice small. I met her eyes. You wanted to prove yourself. I get it, but you came in swinging without asking what we were fighting for. You treated people like obstacles, and me like a footnote. She swallowed hard. What happens now? I leaned in. Oh, that's not up to me anymore. That's the board's call. 10 minutes later, we returned. Diane stood, her voice like a fair judge. Effective immediately, Chloe Mitchell is relieved of all transition leadership duties. Greg will remain in an advisory role through the acquisition period. Nathan Brooks, she turned to me, will lead a transitional advisory team, reporting directly to the board and our prospective partners at Technova. I didn't smile, I just nodded. But the defining moment came from an unexpected voice. Tom Rivera, standing in the corner, cleared his throat. I want to say something, he said, his voice shaky but firm. Nathan taught me everything I know about this company. When Chloe asked me to bypass his protocols, I refused, because I knew his systems kept us standing. If he's not here, I don't think we'd make it through. The room went quiet again. Mike and Sarah nodded, their eyes resolute. Chloe lowered her head, silent. Tom had picked a side, and it was the final blow. After the meeting, Diane pulled me aside. Nathan, she said, the way you handled this, we've never seen anything like it. You didn't just protect your legacy. You showed everyone what real leadership looks like. I nodded, feeling a weight lift. I just did what needed doing, I said. That night, I sat at my usual coffee shop near Peachtree Center. Neon lights, bouncing off the wooden table. I opened my laptop, reading an email from Clay. The cease and desist was acknowledged by the board, she wrote. She's got no moves left. I took a sip of coffee, watching Atlanta's sky darken. Chloe had her chance, but she chose wrong. Now I held the stage, and I'd rewrite the script my way. I signed the consulting contract on a Tuesday morning, sitting in my home office by Lake Lanier, where a crimson sunrise stretched across the still water. The new deal paid 3 times my old salary, with full autonomy and authority over systems integration during the acquisition. I took a sip of black coffee, watching my laptop screen display client dashboards, systems I'd designed, still running smoothly, like a silent engine. After 22 years pouring sweat and soul into CoreLogic dynamics, I hadn't just preserved my legacy, I'd made it shine. My house in suburban Atlanta was quiet, just the sound of birds chirping and lake waves lapping at the shore. The humid spring air clung to my t-shirt, and sunlight streamed through the glass, lighting up my old oak desk. I didn't go back to my old office in Midtown. I didn't need to. CoreLogic was now part of Technova, and I worked remotely, 2 days a week, pacing barefoot on my deck, watching the lake while systems loaded data. That was my victory. Not a title, not a corner office, but the freedom to work on my terms. After the board meeting last week, Chloe left quietly. No goodbye email, no farewell party. Greg shook my hand one last time in the Midtown lobby, his eyes heavy with regret. I'm sorry, he said softly. I know, I replied, then walked away. I didn't need apologies. I needed recognition, and I'd earned it. 2 months later, the acquisition closed. Most of the staff stayed, and I handpicked the new leadership team. Sarah Bennett became director of operations, her steady gaze now guiding an entire department. Mike Delgado took over engineering, his dedication finally recognized. Half the company now reported to people I'd trained, and Tom Rivera, the young employee who once wavered, was now leading the data team, stronger than ever. I didn't just rebuild the team, I rebuilt trust. When Technova took over, I made sure every system I'd designed was protected, every client contract renewed. The complaint letters that once piled up turned into thank you emails. One longtime client, who'd threatened to walk, sent me a bottle of bourbon with a note. "Thanks for keeping us standing." I set the bottle on a shelf, smiling. It wasn't just whiskey, it was proof. But the moment that stopped me came on a Friday evening. As I sat on my deck, laptop open on the wooden table, an email from Diane Foster popped up, subject line Legacy, Nathan. I clicked it, and her words held me still for a long time, staring at the screen. "Nathan," she wrote, "the way you handled this, we've never seen anything like it. You didn't just protect your legacy, you showed everyone what real leadership looks like. Core Logic stands because of you, and Technova knows it." I took a sip of coffee, letting Diane's words sink in. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about power. It was about value, knowing it, owning it, and never letting anyone take it away. I thought about this journey, from that fateful dinner on Peachtree Street, where Chloe called me old man, to the late nights digging through files, facing down Greg, and building levees against the storm. I thought about Tom, the young employee who almost got pulled in but stood by me when it mattered most. I thought about Mike and Sarah, who trusted me even when everything shook. And I thought about myself, the man who once thought loyalty was enough, but learned sometimes you have to fight to keep what's yours. Now sitting by Lake Lanier. I wasn't the quiet engine, Greg once called me. I was the one who wrote this story. And I wrote it with resolve. My system still ran, my company still stood, and my legacy still shone. But I knew, out there somewhere, there were still battles to come. People like Chloe, who think they can step over others. And when they do, I hope someone stands up, like I did, and reminds them that real value is never forgotten. I closed my laptop, stood up, and watched the sunrise over the lake one more time. A new day, a new chapter, and I was ready for whatever came next. Thank you all for following my story. If it inspired you, please press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell, so you don't miss what's next. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in my shoes? I can't wait to hear from you.